Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Welcome to the Virtualization Security Roundtable podcast episode number 89, where today we'll be talking with Identity Logics, a little bit about them later. Our panelist today is Eben Rodriguez, who is an IT industry veteran now serving as a cloud solutions advisor at CA Technologies, which is a change of job for Eben, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Michael Berman is the CTO of Catbird, is usually with us, or one of his director of security, Malcolm Rike, but they are both apparently off the grid today, which I hope that means good things. And there's myself, Edward Haletke, a.k.a. TechSciWill, in the VMware Communities Forum, and author of the book VMware vSphere and Virtual Infrastructure Security, as well as VMware ESX and ESXi in the enterprise. A special guest panelist this week is Michael Basco, who is the co-founder and president of Identity Logics. He focuses on growing Identity Logics as an innovative software company offering solutions that enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of people, processes, and technologies related to information security. Got to get the InfoSec stuff in there. Welcome, Mike. And that's Mike. And also joining us is Michael from Identity Logics. So we're going to get them mixed up. The guaranteed. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Identity Logics does with respect to virtualization and cloud?
Certainly. Thank you very much for that great introduction. Identity Logics focuses on gathering security data that can be leveraged within the organization. In particular, within the virtualization space, the administrative privileges for people that can make changes and do things with the virtualization environment, and also the activity or events that are occurring within the virtualized environment. So we collect all that information, centralize it in one place, and let you have a single view across the enterprise of those two important pieces of security. That would be the administrative role-based access control and the tasks.
Okay. So you actually delve into vSphere's Virtual Center and ESXi management constructs and go from there to grab the roles and permissions that are sitting in there, and then you tie that to what may be sitting in the back-end directory service, and usually that's, in most cases, Active Directory.
Yeah, that is true. That is a problem. That is a problem because they are stored in multiple locations. So the ability to pull those together into one place to give you a single view of the security is important.
Okay, so single view telling me where differences are and why a user may have access to something that they shouldn't have access to.
That's right.
Okay. Eben, you do a lot with ANA. You and I have both been fairly big proponents of high trust, which is more authentication and authorization. Identity Logics to me is not necessarily authentication and authorization, but verification of that authentication and verification of that authorization.
Okay, so
would you say that would be correct?
Help me out here. Help me understand the benefit or difference that an administrator or security team might see by using native vCenter with Active Directory integration versus integrating Identity Logic. What's the benefit or the upscale here, the upside?
Is that question
Mike,
for me? Yeah. What we don't enforce and we don't administer. What we do is we are let's say, call it a sidebar observer. We're a third party. We sit on the outside and we validate, what is there. Let people look at, in effect, a baseline of their entire security settings, no matter what levels they're stored at.
Gotcha.
And identify any anomalies or things, and then changes that are occurring real time are recorded so that you could have a history of how things have progressed and changes that have been made.
And you said it's real time, so we can do alerts and other types of logic like that, right?
That's right. Yeah, there is a full alerting and notification engine embedded in the solution, which I think is important for people when they're trying to manage many users, many administrative users.
Yeah, well, I see where this is going. So what types of functions can be taken as a result of those alerts? Where do you see this going, or how are customers using it today to maybe, even though you're just doing a detective role, there's a lot of information that we don't get normally. So you offer some enhanced detection capabilities. I'm wondering what actions people take by using your product. Is it just a report, shows up an email or a red light comes on somewhere? Or can you actually maybe shut down a flow or, go in and kill something that shouldn't be going on somehow?
Yeah, we have a full and active, like a trigger-based capability, so that you can take alerts, you can notify people, you can create some type of a trigger and action to take if you wanted, a programmatic action. So it really is more efficient, obviously, as the environment gets bigger and larger and more complex, that automated actions maybe be incorporated into the system. That helps people in large enterprises manage big environments.
So let's look at a large enterprise. I mean, the average virtual environment with vSphere has, and Mike Foley, you can add on to this because you actually delve into this a lot too, where they at least have vCenter. So they may have 40 or so admins using vCenter. Then they may actually have those 40 or so admins with access to ESXi or vSphere 5's management console directly. Then they may have actually, those 40 or 50 admins may actually have access to a VMware management administrator. So we're talking about VMA access, and then some of them will also use PowerShell, which directly accesses any one of those. And then you have, what am I missing? Then I may have like VCOps, and it has its own management construct, or I may have System Center because I need to manage Microsoft Hyper-V as well as Zen, or want to do it through there. So I have management constructs through there. All of them may or may not be using Active Directory. They may or may not have users all in the same groups. Mike Foley, did I miss anything?
And don't forget that each admin in those various locations, they might have a different, let's say, set of permissions that have been assigned to that. So if you take the degree of difficulty and complexity of managing, say, 80 permissions across 40 admins, maybe in 2 locations within your virtual environment, you're talking about thousands of possible permutations of security, which a little one of those attributes changed one way could have an effect on security for your environment. So
that's called the butterfly effect.
Yeah, it's very.
Mike Foley?
Yeah, that's called the butterfly effect. I've been trying to find a really good visual to show this to folks. One minor change way down deep could have major security ramifications.
Can you give me an example of that?
Oh,
yes, it's admin group.
Yeah, setting a switch in promiscuous mode. I mean, any number of different pieces. Putting a VM on the wrong switch.
Or adding a user to the ESX admins group that's part of every Active Directory for vCenter.
Okay, so you're talking about simple things that somebody might do to get past a little problem they're having, and they never go back and resolve it, right? And these things kind of add up, right?
Yeah, they become folklore at that point.
Yeah. And there's also a hierarchy. There's also a hierarchy of how permissions are rendered, and ultimately when virtualized environments make their decisions on authorization. And so, as you had intimated, admins do this all the time, where they do something quick and dirty, maybe at a server level, and you're right, they never go back to undo it, but they don't want to because it's convenient, it's fast, and they can go on and do their job. But the trouble is it doesn't really follow, let's say, management or company policy or practice, because it really should go maybe through a change management process to probably properly ascertain any of the implications on the system and what might be the implications of that change. So, having the visual ability to detect when something like that has occurred, it could be within management policy. Maybe management knows that, then that's fine. But if management doesn't know about it, the proper people can be alerted that change occurred, and things can go more smoothly.
So I have a question about integrating or maybe evaluating this technology. Sounds like I heard real time and alert and things like this. Now, if I were to decide that I want to try this out or purchase it and start using it, does it have any way to go back in time at a database and see what happened, or does it take effect from the moment I configure it going forward?
Well, that's a good question, and we think it's very important to have the ability to baseline what's occurred within a system as well, and that's important for regulatory purposes or compliance with regulations. So that from day one when you install, we do have the ability to go back in and look at the history of things that have occurred in the system, and then create a baseline in the system from a task perspective. And then also from an administrative role-based security perspective, we do take a baseline of exactly what's configured in the system as of the date of installation. And then as it goes forward in time, both administrative RBOC as well as tasks, all changes to those important levels of security are all recorded.
Okay.
And if you took a data, one of the old vCenter databases, for example, if you could get a hold of it, you can get a hold of whatever the old permissions files from backup.
Yeah, you can kind of play it back.
You can report. You can actually, if you put it in the right format, it will actually import into SpyLogic, so you actually have some historical data to go by.
That's
Can you
right.
repeat what you just said? It cut out a little bit.
Well,
you can import it into what?
What we do is we go through the VMware vSphere interfaces, APIs, and we read in and record the persistently stored task information. From the day one that our product is installed, we can read in the historical information. After that, we measure all the changes going forward. But what is kind of unique about our product is also for many of these customers, they start from the beginning and they put in the free product. And the free product also has tasks, but they're not persistently recorded. So when our product is installed going forward, we also capture all those ephemeral tasks that are just in memory, just briefly, but then we take them and read them and record them persistently in our system. So for people starting out with VMware, they do have a nice ability to track all the activity using our product, even though VMware itself, through vCenter, will not persistently record those tasks.
Wow, that's amazing.
About this, Mike, didn't you say at one point in time you also can import just about anything that can come in that would be related?
Yes, we have a nice architecture at the front end that all the just about any enterprise security resource can be input data into the system, and the system itself, the platform that the SpyLogix platform that processes the data and makes it available for analysis, for sharing within the enterprise or interfacing with other programs. That's all agnostic as to what the source is. So the VMware vSphere information is one of the inputs, and we take, like we mentioned, administrative RBOC as well as task data. But we also interface with Active Directory, and that's where we get the full view of the users and groups that are administrative users for the virtualized environment that are stored in Active Directory, because we can monitor that resource as well. And then there's other examples of enterprise security resources that we do pull into the system that would be of interest. For example, applications that are running in the virtualized environment could easily centralize just by their activity by sending their events to the Spylogics platform. The Spylogics will consume those events and blend it right in with all the other security-related information in the environment.
And thinking about this way, I'm thinking about this way, I guess, not how I would use this or use something like this is, say if I had that large number of admins all touching each of these individual pieces, I could literally have SpyLogic go through the whole Active Directory tree, the whole rollback for my administrators, but I could also send them to each individual Windows machine and each individual Linux machine to get the information from there. And I can actually get a fairly good picture of what that admin can access, or even what any user can access throughout the whole environment. So for example, if I have a sudden permission where I put this user in a group in Active Directory, it's an innocuous looking group, it could turn out that it could give them access to just about anything. Because at the moment, true. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. For example, like shared files that might be under virtualized Windows servers. You know, we have the ability to access all those file and folder objects, and we can consume all the security permissions for who's accessing those files. For example, that's very important. For example, people who are subject to PCI regulations or sensitive credit card information that's stored in files, as well as, say, for example, the health industry, where they're worried about PHI data to be compliant with HIPAA regulations.
So in this case, if I had a user, I put him in this group, let's just call it view users, because I need him access to view, and suddenly view users is able to access things they shouldn't be able to access. The potential is there that it could be abused. Whether or not it is a different story, but the potential could be there.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good point, Ed. And we know that there are some potential activity that could be malicious that is intentional, and then there could be issues that are identified that are accidents. So you don't really know, but the important thing is that you can detect both types.
Mm-hmm. And that actually could be an extremely powerful thing. If we take that 40 admins, we put them in there, we supposedly have them all locked down, and we find out that they actually do have access to, well, even that, let's pick on developers for a second. I can have a bunch of users and groups and users and give them access to a bunch of development machines, and somebody did something once that was so simple to allow them to modify something in the virtual environment as a developer, and turns out that they still have that access, and they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's where with good cooperation and sharing security data throughout the enterprise, a product that is detecting these kinds of changes occurring can then trigger an action that cooperates with an installed tool that actually goes through maybe a workflow or a proper management procedure to either give that privilege or permission or take it away. And that way management policy for the enterprise is enforced through tools, and the environment is more secure.
So let's talk about authentication authorization a little bit. We can authenticate users against Active Directory or any type of directory service, and those users are generally authorized. Now, all that data is stored where? In a virtual and cloud environment. It'll be stored inside of the management tools of the environment. Mike Foley, have you noticed any other places that it could have been stored? You've looked at this a little bit more in depth than some of the others.
Yeah, the identities themselves?
Yeah, the identities. Where would I get my authentication and authorization? I know in vSphere it's stored in vCenter, but I authenticate against AD. My authorizations are in vCenter. In System Center, it's kind of the same way, but everything's kind of in AD.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of customers are using either AD or straight up LDAP servers, like the Sun Netscape LDAP servers that were out a number of years ago. And then there's a subset that are using standard SQL databases for storing a lot of their identities.
And that's kind of interesting because I'm authenticating against that, but all the RBAC may never be even stored with the identities.
Yeah, usually not. The RBAC stuff's usually at the application level. Usually held separately from the identity, at least from what I've seen.
Now, shouldn't it be together?
Well, the way people use that is by using Active Directory groups and then just setting the RBACs based on groups rather than people. So should it be stored with the identity? Probably not.
Okay, so but you want
because then you're going to need to code all your applications to deal with that. So at that stage, you're talking a standard. I think it's easier for people to just use LDAP or Active Directory groups and then just protect based on a group basis.
But granted, most applications can do users or groups.
Yeah.
Because you can get the identity information, then you can also get the group owner, group, or are you a part of X group, or are you this user? Because in vCenter you can do that. I know in System Center you can do that.
Yeah.
Then console, I'm pretty sure you can do that.
And then you're going to do RBAC on the objects themselves. That's going to be at the application level.
Yeah. So we got like 101 ways we can do this.
Yep.
But then you got tools like Horizon. I mean, I'm just thinking about general A&A. We always think about it from an administrative perspective, and I know you and I talked about that in the past. But really, is that the issue? Is it really just the admins? I think it's anybody in the whole enterprise, whether that enterprise lives in the cloud or lives in a hybrid cloud or lives in the data center. It's really about
your identity is becoming a much more important commodity when you start going into a cloud environment, because you really need to verify, Mike is who he says he is, because then based on that identity, I'm going to allow him access to all sorts of stuff.
But we don't have unique cloud identities. I do know we have some people who would like to be unique identity stores like Google and Salesforce and things of that nature, but not. I mean, it's like you're not born.
Yeah, there was actually something I think last week or two, and I'll see if I can find it and forward it to you, Edward. One town was considering using Facebook to have people's Facebook identities as a basis for them to vote in town elections.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Ooh, that sounds scary.
Oh, it's insane. But think about it. Facebook has somewhere between 500 million and 750 million users and identities.
You got to start somewhere. Right?
I'm gonna guess that we'll say it's 500 million. I'm gonna guess that other than maybe us on the call and probably a couple hundred people in the security industry, the rest are like, well, why can't I use my Facebook identity? I logged in.
Yeah. And I mean,
right?
That might be good enough for many people, but as long as they have an alternate way, like if they're using OpenID or some other sort of solution, it's good.
My sister's not going to use OpenID.
It's a good start, I'm saying.
Don't even know how to spell it.
It's better than a shared password or some other sort of setup that we have.
Yeah, and I really think over the long term what you're going to need is continuous verification of identity. Just because I verified that you were Edward, 2 hours ago, I may want to assure myself that you're still Edward. And then based on patterns of what you're doing or what you're accessing, what information you're accessing, where you're coming from, all that adaptive sort of stuff, I may want to then query you on a semi-random basis to ensure that you are still who you are, and not someone who just walked off with Edward's laptop at Starbucks.
And then also begs the question when we start looking and talking about things like spy logics is can you and this is for Mike Habasco's, that can you actually get security or authentication data or any of the roles and the role-based access controls from things like Facebook or Twitter or Salesforce or Google, whatever they're using? Can you import that in? Because
no, it would be pretty much authentication only.
Well, you still need to know who they are because, think about WordPress or any type of modern web application.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've seen a lot of applications that offer actually multiple forms of identification or actually authentication, but you still tie them into one account. And there's some systems that use multiple. Like, anybody use the trip thing? I forget what it's called, the trip planning website. You can connect. You can log in with your Google ID, your Facebook ID. You can log in with any one of those things, Twitter, and they're all tied together. So it knows who you are no matter how you authenticate, and you have one account with all those different forms of authentication.
So that begs the question. Begs the thing is why not I just set up a different account for my Twitter ID versus my Facebook ID versus my Google ID?
Well, you might.
Preventing doing that.
You might. What are we talking about here? Because I'm just saying those solutions exist.
No, the solution you said is I'm tying one user to all these different authentication methods that I'm talking about. There's one user, but he has created multiple accounts using multiple different authentication methods. You're assuming everybody's playing by the rules. I'm not.
Well, I think what you're alluding to is the importance of monitoring identities and entitlements, no matter where they are. If you're an enterprise user or an enterprise, and you're allowing your internal users to access outside websites, and those outside websites are federating your identity data to other outside websites, that's starting to become a problem. So what you have to do as an enterprise, and I'm not talking about consumers voting like you were mentioning before. I'm talking because that's pretty hard to control. But if you're an enterprise, you're going to have a real vested interest in understanding what your users are doing from your corporate network, where they're going, and what they have access to and permissions to do. So having one way to monitor the identity on your system in the enterprise, as well as on other external websites, and how they view that identity, and monitor the activity occurring on those external websites from your internal enterprise network is it's highly desirable, let's say, from a security perspective.
Now I'm thinking about the use case for voting as well. Is that I do a voter registration card, and I could do one. Think about all these people that have voted that have been passed away for years. They could all have Facebook accounts too. Who's to say who's the right person if I just log in with my Facebook account? It could be I could be doing it 14 times with 14 different identities.
Facebook voting is really, from a security perspective, it's just unacceptable because as many as 50% of Facebook identities could be bogus, or somebody's multiple personality.
Yeah, but if I have whatever you're using to track who I am, whether it's a driver's license or a street address or some other sort of registration process, and I use that to say I want to authenticate for my identity with Facebook, that's better than I want to authenticate with a bill from a PG&E, or a utility company or something. Because anybody could just grab that out of my trash can or make one up on the internet and go and use that and impersonate me. And to be honest, it's a numbers game. It's all about statistics. So if we believe there's a higher level of trust with Facebook than with some other weaker form of identity, then it's a good start. That's all I'm saying. It comes down to numbers.
But is it a good start? That's the big question.
There's always going to be fraud that happens, no matter what. So the question is, are these companies leveraging tools to help them discover that fraud and get ahead of the game.
I understand the discussion, and I understand you're trying to go for efficiency and everything. But in the identity field, in access management industry, we all know that any authentication is only as good as the authoritative source. That's why sometimes people use biometrics, or they'll use a card access system or something.
You got to use. Agreed. You got to use the right.
Facebook
depending on the security, you got to use the right level of security.
I'd rather use a weaker form from like a utility company identity than Facebook, because you wouldn't necessarily say that Facebook is an authoritative source to prove the person's electronic personality. But I think that's probably a discussion really for another podcast, perhaps.
But it brings in the question of, can you get data from these entities so that, or can you track that? Oh yeah, they logged in with Facebook. They authenticated against Facebook. They authenticated against Salesforce. They authenticated against so and so. Can you track that information about from where they authenticated?
Yeah, usually you can, because most of those cloud services have some type of an interface. I can't speak particularly to Facebook, but products like Google's Cloud and Azure from Microsoft, they do have administrative interfaces so that you could track activity that's occurring in the cloud, and so that information can be culled from the cloud services and brought into a single place to kind of keep track on your users. But again, I think we're talking about two different marketplaces. Again, I come from the perspective of enterprises and their concerns over data security, and then there's the consumer marketplace, which is.
Well, I'm actually thinking about the enterprise as well, because if I'm an enterprise and I allow you to authenticate out using any mechanism, and there's actually several enterprises right now that are authenticating against Salesforce versus authenticating against their own stores. Because everything's cloud-based. If I go cloud-based right now, there is no data center. There are no bastions. I don't know what's in anywhere. And all it is me providing a software as a service type approach to everything. You don't know where that is. It is only for my enterprise. I could have 100,000 people working for my company. Let's say I'm really big. Where do I provide? How can I do a centralized authentication store when, hey, Salesforce already has one, why not just use that? Or Google already has one, we'll just make sure everybody has a Google Mail account.
Well, it sounds like you have to identify your authentication stores and have them as some method to get the logs and activity tracking from those authentication sources into the SpyLogic server.
Exactly. That's what I'm asking. Is that possible? I think that makes a lot more sense.
And, if Facebook doesn't have that, then that's not a good way of authentication, right? So we can't tell who's logging into Facebook and what IP address they're coming from and whatnot. So that's a
great point, because,
right?
There's a lot of trust relationships that are going on here between these different parties, but if you cannot verify the relationship and monitor it, then it's not a trustworthy.
What you're doing is you're delegating trust, right? So you're saying, I trust Facebook to keep track of who these people are, and so I don't want to have anything to do with it. So as long as it's Facebook, I'm going to let it in. So if you delegate that trust, now you're just saying we're as weak as Facebook. But what you're talking about is enterprises are probably not going to be okay with that. Enterprises need to trust but verify. Thank you, Mike Foley. Right?
Yeah.
So I need to have either real-time verification. I want to know exactly who's coming in on demand so that I can make that alert and take action and maybe kick that person out before they make any damage.
And I can tell you too that the industry is going in the right direction with that, because all these abilities to share identities and do that, it's happening because of federated protocols and technologies that are occurring, whether it's OpenID or some type of other XML standard like SAML. But these sites are sharing identity information, and more often than not, it's based on an LDAP type interface. And from the enterprise perspective, that is something like could be monitored by a product like Spylogics, because those same network channels can baseline and monitor that identity data that's available, no matter whether that identity store is in a cloud or that identity store is on the enterprise network. And so having one place to audit those entitlements and then have an ability to collect and aggregate all the activity across multiple websites. For example, like Azure provides an audit API from Microsoft's cloud. That is an example of having that security data in one place. And I agree with you that it's really of a high importance for enterprises to get control over that information. And if they can't, then they really have to think twice about letting users outside their enterprise network and accessing these outside services.
So I'm going to go back a few years. I want to know how this relates or what's different than anybody remember TriCipher in 2007 was talking about this sort of thing.
TriCipher is part of VMware. It's part of Horizon App
Manager. Right. So is there an equivalent capability that exists today to have these validated, high-trust, distributed PKI authentication that can be used by consumers? Their big selling point, they were talking about how, using a RSA two-factor authentication token could be intercepted by man-in-the-middle attacks. And if you use us, then we can authenticate millions of users in the cloud, anyone from home, and it puts a little cookie or token or something, that multi-factor authentication that it uses with PKI. Is this anything better than that nowadays?
Talking about TriCipher and HAM, I could ask the question of Mike and Habasco is that what can you read into Spylogics so that I can get that unified view?
Well, for example, along the lines of what was being discussed, like PKI-type authentication systems, we can also interface with Spylogics and monitor those resources, because as you know, things that are stored within a certificate authority are of importance that would want to be recorded. It would be things like how long is the certificate valid for, what is the date of expiration, etc. That's also another type of identity source that someone would want to monitor continuously and then look at the information in real time. So definitely, I think, as far as your other comment was about how effective, I think PKI is very effective. It's a very secure technology, although things are actually going in a lot of directions, and I don't know that any one is going to win out. Only the market will tell. But people are going for things like voice biometrics to authenticate people, because they don't have to have anything physical. They're kind of having, say like a voice biometric, somebody's voice print, and validating their access to systems that way.
Seems like you could just record my voice off a podcast or something and maybe play it back. I wonder how that works. Yeah, the way those kinds of the systems don't work that way though. What they're doing is they're doing a mathematical sampling of how you say certain things to enable to enroll you. So it's really not a recording of the voice.
Okay.
It's
more like a mathematical representation of it. Yeah. So it's a lot more secure than that. But like I say, I think that PKI is really good in government and some other places. It's very, very secure. But I think it hasn't really, because of cost probably, and maybe difficulty in deploying and maintaining it, to be able to reach the masses of consumers to use that for authentication. But
let's go back to that list. I'm looking for a list of what Spylogics supports natively. So you say, I can read from certificate servers, you can read from Active Directory and any LDAP source. Can you read from, you mentioned Azure, can you get data from there?
I'm sorry, what?
You mentioned Azure in their login mechanism. Can you pick data from there?
Yeah, we can get data from mainframes. So like your typical enterprise mainframe platforms, security products like RACF, ACF2, and Top Secret. We can get them from web security products like SiteMinder, which is probably the market leader in web single sign-on and access control products, and also the popular identity management products that actually can provision users and entitlements in enterprises. For example, CA's Identity Minder product, formerly called Identity Manager. And we're also getting, we also collect information from the desktops, like when users are logged on, when users are logged off, and that's a harder one to get a hold of when users are logged off their desktops. So we are able to collect that information from endpoints. So those are some popular points.
And now vSphere as well as Azure and vCenter. So you got a full list of products you support.
That's right. FIM 2010 is a popular identity management product for Microsoft clients too, and we support that product as well.
Okay. So there's a full line of things you can get. Can you get it all in one place and get alerted on, gee, this user shouldn't actually have access to that file or to that system or whatnot?
That's right.
And I can get alerted on when groups change, so groups within groups, and all the way down the LDAP Active Directory tree. I can figure out where a user lives and what they have access to.
So are companies using these sort of ad hoc, or are they building automation into their programs or processes?
Well, to be able to centralize and have access to so much information, the first step that they go through is just the ability to have that cross-contextual security data at their fingertips so that they could search through it and identify anomalies. For example, as Ed was mentioning, maybe entitlements that are conflicting in two different sources so that they could fix that. So they all start out as just having the ability to get through to identify anomalies immediately. That's the first step. Then once they understand for their particular environment what things that they need to be watching for, because they can't real-time monitor everything in an enterprise, they just have to decide what's highest priority and what's important to them from maybe a governance perspective, or could be even a compliance perspective, like I mentioned earlier, HIPAA or PCI regulation. It could be stipulating that activity data must be reviewed nightly. We could, for example, with Spylogics, what we want to do is we want to change that and even up that paradigm to, if it's important enough to check nightly, it might be important enough to check continuously. So then once you identify those certain things that need to be monitored constantly and continuously, then you could set up those alerts and notifications to tell you about an alert being more something that's very important and has to be acted on.
I mean, here's where I'm going with. I come from. I've spent the last year working at eBay to help them reduce fraud and improve trust on their marketplace. And as you know, buying and selling things, online, there's a lot of fraud that goes on. You might there's all kinds of problems that they have. But basically, this risk rating we've been talking about and finding out who's doing what and if it's trusted or not, or if they're supposed to be, enterprises could start to use some of the same methods to take action. So where I'm going with this is, instead of just alerting and notifying people, then somebody has to manually do something. What they manually do, they're probably going to have a playbook. Say someone's got to be there watching the alerts. A lot of times these security types of alerts are outsourced to a third party. They need to know what they can do, right? Do you kill that VPN session? Or if the guy came in and, like we talked about, put a virtual machine on the wrong port, do we move it to the right port, or do we disconnect it from that wrong port and send an email to somebody to remediate it, right? So I'm wondering how we can automate these types of actions and if anybody's doing that sort of thing.
Called Puppet Chef.
So we can drive a Puppet script that would go in and disconnect a machine from a network if it was put on there incorrectly because of a risk rating.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to automate things, make things more efficient. And if it is a simple, for example, an account is added and let's say through a backdoor utility, an admin went in and added an account. Well, a trigger could be set off with Biologics that would immediately disable the account and notify the identity management product to push that account through a standard company standard workflow process to get that account properly vetted and
so it might open a ticket, right?
It
might open a ticket with the ticketing system. So that's a good one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that, and so the product does enable you to. We have a trigger architecture that allows you to fire off after an alert is identified the option of triggering an action to help integrate and share that information with other products in the enterprise. Many products take, for example, self-defining XML messages as input to take actions. For example, like you mentioned, help desk products, identity management products. From a security perspective, they will take XML documents. So the product Biologics can help with that automation and facilitate that by creating the XML document and sending it to the product, or letting the product that handles that do what its job is supposed to be. A good example of that would be like a permission was added to a virtualized VMware vSphere environment that we detected a change, and then maybe that could get sent back through to like a high trust type product that would reset that RBAC privilege permission back to maybe what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, there's a remediation little jobs or things you can do in high trust.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So
awesome.
we're at the end of our hour. So Mike Cabasco, you got any last thoughts? Actually, I'll get to you first. Eben, you're first.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I think it's raising the bar on just logging and tracking what's going on to a truly distributed system. I looked through the architecture documents online, and I like how it's been designed to scale to cloud level enterprises and bigger designs. And the fact that they're integrating with these other third parties and they got a great ecosystem of partners is really encouraging. So I'm looking forward to trying this out and seeing how customers are using it in the field.
Mike Foley, you have nothing to add?
No, not right now. I kind of came in a little too late to get a whole bunch of the context. I was just reacting as usual.
Hey, that's fine too. Mike Cabasco, you got a last word?
Yes, I do, and I think that over the last decade, the top three areas of security spend in any enterprises has consistently been security. So always at the top of their list in their budgets. So, but most of that security spend has been on the perimeter, and so today, what I really like the idea that clients are moving from the importance of perimeter security and log event-based security collection and moving that into more of a continuous and real-time processing of the information. So let's get inside the perimeter and really look at the access identity, access management, and activities that are occurring, and then share that information throughout the enterprise in a real-time fashion so that people can really optimize their security and make their business more efficient and secure at the same time. And so that's why I really like the idea that companies are more attuned to making their businesses more efficient, especially in this economy that we are in today.
And I like to finish with being able to look into your environment and find out all your authentication sources and all your role-based access controls, and then being able to do an analysis to determine exactly what rights a particular user has within inside of a given environment, whether that's a virtual environment, a cloud environment, or even just a standard application environment, or even just a lowly file that you want to read, is incredibly important. It's an audit that should be happening on a regular basis, and I don't think it is in most companies. So that is the end of our hour, and thank you for joining us on the Virtualization Security Roundtable, episode number 89. I'd like to thank Mike Habasco of Identity Logics for joining us and all our standard panelists. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you for having us, Ed.
Thanks.